يا هلا 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 حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the program. It's a Wednesday morning and as always, I'm so keen to be with you and to share the amazing company that joins us in the studio to get talking about a whole host of issues. We'll be talking to Dr. Nazim Abrams from the Lighthouse on the Horizon. We'll be talking drug rehabilitation, recovery, etc. He has been on the show a couple of weeks ago. We're going to kind of dig a little deeper to see if there is hope for your loved one, and he's here to give us all of those answers. We will also be talking to an organization called I Am Possible. It has to do with road safety, and what better time to be talking about road safety than with the onset of the festive season. We'll kick off by talking to someone who's spent a long time in the UK. He's a psychiatrist and he specializes in memory care. He's based at the Akiso Clinics in Parktown, Johannesburg, and we're going to talk Alzheimer's, dementia, and of course memory care and how we can help our loved ones who might be suffering from one of these conditions. His name is Dr. Ryan Fuller, and we're very pleased to welcome him to the studio this morning. Morning, welcome to the program.
Morning, Julie. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for your very valuable time. I know we scheduled you for a little while ago, but you weren't able to make it, but so pleased that you're here now. I understand that you spent some time in the UK and you specialized in old age psychiatry in London.
That's correct.
Lo and behold, you came back to South Africa and in for a very rude shock because you realized there was a gap in the mental health field. What was it? And as we speak now, is that gap closing as far as memory care is concerned? And what does the scenario look like in the UK and elsewhere in the world?
Good, simple question, I see. Thank you very much.
I'm sure you can handle it.
Yes, I think the problem with helping older people is it traditionally should fall to the government. It's a psychosocial problem, meaning that there's psychological distress often, regardless of whether it's dementia or physical ailments, social meaning in the community. So most health systems like the UK, the US, Australia, New Zealand will have government programs. We will have day clinics, community services, where the doctor is just part of a larger team. Unfortunately, in South Africa, certainly in government sector, we don't have that. Not because they're not interested, just there's a lot of other competing priorities, child and maternal health, HIV, TB, many health trouble. In private healthcare, there's often fragmented services where unfortunately doctors are not paid to work in teams. And so we've worked with some of the funders trying to address how that funding model can change. And there are some, you asked what changes have there been. There are some good innovative things happening. PPO Serve is a company that springs to mind that works with teams of GPs and specialists, community nurses. And so it's trying to get away from putting older people in hospital, basically, trying to help them with community services. There is so much fragmentation. I'm sure in your own social systems, I know there are a lot of very good Muslim organizations that look after people, which is amazing. Certainly there are a lot of Jewish organizations that do similar work. We sort of half joke and say Christians are appalling at it, unfortunately. Sort of dump people in old age homes and hope they get better, and that's not right. Mm-hmm. So it's a big area to talk about for sure.
And sadly, often in our community, the Muslims, it's almost unheard of, of placing your elders in old age homes. But I suppose the situation becomes so tenuous depending on how seriously ill or how demented, if that's a correct terminology to be using, how demented your loved one is, that the loved ones at home, back home, cannot cope. They don't know how to cope. They don't know what to do with this person who's, sad to say, driving them crazy.
Absolutely. And I think one needs to acknowledge that this space is complex, that every patient is different, every family is different, and they have different needs, and one needs a comprehensive assessment, not by a specialist necessarily to start with, ideally by a social worker. That's not a threatening process, it's to genuinely describe the family system. Because if we can get a sense of the family system, we can then work out what options there are. Many times in different communities, dominant members of the family, the decision makers, the income earners are working away from home, or they're overseas, or they're not on speaking terms. We joke there's no perfect family. And our job is to try and define what the family system looks like without judging it. And then we're driven by a set of ethics and principles, and not rules. And these principles are, we try and do the least restrictive thing. So the most restrictive thing for the loved one with dementia, for example, would be to put them in a dementia unit and sort of lock the door. The least restrictive thing would be to keep them at home and do nothing. But in between that spectrum, one needs to find the least, because the patient is entitled to a sense of autonomy. We can't just go in and make decisions for them. We need to work out, can they make certain decisions? We need to act in their best interests and find out when they were well, when they were not suffering with dementia, what would they wanted for themselves? We need to then assume they can make decisions and optimize that. If they need a hearing aid, we need to get them a hearing aid. We need to give them time to process the decision. Very often families, as you say, are so stressed, it leads to caregiver burnout. Sometimes they have, money is thrown at the problem, they hire carers, and how domestic workers or carers are introduced is often out of love, just to sort of crisis management. But if the patient suddenly has a stranger in their space, they often kick out and react to that. And then they're regarded as violent and unmanageable. That's very common. Then they'll come to doctors like me and say, please sedate them. And then we can't just give medication and say, we need to understand what's driving that process. So most of it is about trying to help the entire family system. And that's where post-diagnostic counseling is so important. Helping the family understand what is the medical condition, whatever that may be, what are the psychological consequences of that condition. So part of memory care's ethos is to be with, which is deliberate, is to say that to be with the patient suffering throughout the care pathway, to be with the family, God forbid, when the patient ultimately passes on and dies. And then there's a grief reaction in the survivors. And so it's important for us to understand what emotional transactions are possible.
You talk about memory care, but you also talk about it being a multidisciplinary mental health care unit, so to speak.
Sure.
Now, when we talk memory care, who are we targeting? Are we targeting generally the older people, the older population? And you also spoke about dementia, and then recently we're also hearing Alzheimer's. What would the difference be between dementia and Alzheimer's? How would I know that my loved one needs some sort of support or assessment or care? In between all of that, you also mentioned depression.
Yes.
How does, the ordinary layperson kind of, distinguish what's going on with my loved one? Do we go to a GP first,
yes,
or do we come to someone like you, to your clinic,
yes,
to try and just understand what's going on with this person?
Sure. So dementia is a syndrome. It's a descriptive term denoting chronic brain failure. There are many causes of that. Alzheimer's is the commonest cause, but there's a long sort of shopping list of other causes of dementia. It means progressive cognitive or brain decline. Most people will understand Alzheimer's. When it's the commonest, there's sort of 70 to 80% of dementias are caused by Alzheimer's. The short answer is we don't really know what triggers the cause of Alzheimer's. There's a lot of theories and risk factors, and we can talk a bit about that if you'd like, but I think the important thing is that other dementias, or vascular dementia, or stroke dementia, like I said earlier, very often the people we try help are over the age of 65, because that's a sort of traditional retirement age. As you were saying off air, people are living a lot longer though, And it's not uncommon for people to have 2 or 3 careers and to be working at the age of 70 or even 80. And so we try not to be ageist. We don't say we're only going to see people over 65. There is a rarer dementia called frontotemporal dementia, for example, that starts under 65 typically, and they're early onset dementias. And this is not to freak people out, but it is possible to have a memory decline under the age of 65, in your mid-50s. And so we do see people who are under 65, but we see people all the way right through 95. We had a 98-year-old lady who was clear as sound as a bell.
Wow.
That being said, when you asked about depression, there's a concept called pseudo-dementia. Pseudo means it looks like it, but it's not. And the commonest problem we try to help in memory care is not actually dementia. It's a stress-induced life change, almost like an old age crisis. But like most people understand midlife crisis, you get a late life crisis. Existential angst is the sort of technical term. And what that means is that often when people retire, that loss of day-to-day activity is very threatening, and it's quite normal for a human being to look at their life and then review what they were doing before.
And feel almost useless
and
now.
then think,
I have no purpose.
Is this it? and then you have to look at, unfortunately, friends or family who are moving away or passing on. And watching life slow down like that can be soul-destroying.
Is that when they start sinking into depression, perhaps?
Exactly.
Okay, let's hold that thought. We need to go for our first ad break.
Sure.
We're talking memory care with Dr. Ryan Fuller. He's from the Akiso Clinics in Parktown, Johannesburg. Don't go away. We're going for our first ad break. We will be continuing this discussion right after. Welcome back. We're still going to be talking to Dr. Nazim Abrams from the Lighthouse on the Horizon Drug Rehab Center, and then we'll talk to the I Am Possible Foundation about road safety. Right now we're talking to Dr. Ryan Fuller from the Memory Care, and he's with Akiso Clinics in Parktown. We're talking memory care, Alzheimer's, dementia, and as much as we can possibly pack into the show this morning. Younger people, we know, and we've talked about this off air, that because people are living longer, into their 80s, 90s, and even beyond, that there is a possibility they're going to present with Alzheimer's or some sort of old age disease, and they're going to need taking care of. And that's where your memory clinic and your unit comes in. But what about younger people that present with memory problems? Let's assume they're in their 30s and 40s.
Sure.
What would the causes be, and what sort of signs and symptoms should we be looking out for? And is there help for them?
Sure, that's a great question. I think the commonest cause for younger adults is stress, and the sort of westernized idea of getting ahead and the pressure of competing and whatnot. What we tend to see is a lot of clinical depression. So it's quite common for depression in a younger person to start with difficulty with concentration, difficulty with attention. Because if you think about memory as a process, the first thing you need is attention or wakefulness. And if you're feeling flat or tired because of a physical illness or depression, you need to register the data in order to consolidate it, to form a memory, and then retrieve it later. So we see a lot of memory difficulties that we treat depression, and we use an antidepressant, and then we use psychotherapy or cognitive therapy with a good psychologist. The other problems in younger people are bipolar disorder is a sort of common thing that's known. It's often overdiagnosed, certainly in South Africa.
We are hearing more and more about bipolar, aren't we? Why is that?
There's a couple of basic reasons. One of them is there's a perverse incentive. Unfortunately, bipolar is a prescribed minimum benefit. By law, the medical aids have to fund it at the level of state services and resources. And so unfortunately, there is a degree of what we call upcoding, where patients can't access benefits in private healthcare for mood stabilizers. And so they're classified as bipolar when they're not really. They may have emotionally unstable borderline personalities or other types of depression. The problem is Once someone is given a label bipolar, they'll often go and sort of Google it and think about it, and then get into the system of just taking medication excessively for what can be a life crisis or a life problem. We sort of half joke and say psychiatrists should really only see people with mental illnesses. We shouldn't really be seeing people who are not that sick. So just I wanted to say that one of the best things that one needs to focus, difficult to do, is quality of relationships, especially for younger people. There's great evidence that people who are in close, helpful relationships and maintain those relationships, they do well in life physically and with memory later in life. There's a wonderful Harvard study that's been going for 80 years that shows that regardless of genes and upbringing and social class and IQ, one's quality of interpersonal relationships is probably the best protective factor for memory. And we see that in the later years. So when a man typically presents with a good wife, their prognosis is far better because the wife will sort of drag them to the doctor. So single men in later years do very poorly. They don't live as long, and they tend to dement, unfortunately.
It's almost it's almost as if they have no purpose.
Yes, yes.
If you see young people, young patients presenting with memory problems, is that perhaps suggesting that in later life they're going to present with Alzheimer's or some form of dementia, even though there is an intervention in place by people like yourself at age 30 or 40? And what would that intervention look like, and how long-standing would it be?
I don't think so. I think depression itself is a risk factor for dementia, whether it's Alzheimer's or vascular dementia. But that's late life depression. Early onset depression in the sort of 20s and 30s, or whether it is genuine bipolar disorder, I think any active serious mental illness is a risk factor, but there needs to be treatment for that, medication, therapy, and it must be said, stepping back a bit, a really good GP that gets to know the patient and the family. Step one is going to the GP. I think that is crucial. And many GPs are well trained and qualified to treat uncomplicated depression. The idea then is the specialists in the background to then advise the GP, because there'll be other health challenges as well. We must mention drugs and alcohol. I see you've got other speakers coming on. Alcohol is an enormous problem. That is a major risk factor later in life for alcohol-related dementia. And with any other,
that's all irreversible?
At a certain point, yes. You'll see changes. It depends on the quantity consumed, but from the sort of 50s and 60s, if a person has serious alcohol problems, the brain will start to shrink, and you will then, yes, that process is irreversible. That being said, we have had late life detoxes, where an older person comes in, we take them off the alcohol, we give them other medicine, we try, and the brain wakes up a bit, and then it's often not as serious or severe as we thought, but they do tend to then need to be in long-term care. And as you mentioned earlier, that transition from going from staying at home to placement in a frail care or assisted living is extremely traumatic for the family. But to your earlier point about the younger onset mental health problems, I mean, that's a long trajectory. If you think 20s and 30s, if one does survive till your 70s and 80s, there are many other environmental factors, I think, that come into play that will probably trigger a dementia. A lot of research is now into stress. Stress releases cortisol, and what is it about our sort of westernized lifestyle? In the UK, there's a statistic, 1 in 3 babies born in the UK will probably suffer with the dementia if they live that long. That's a lot of humans. So what is it about that lifestyle that is, it's not just that people are living longer, there's something that we're doing in our day-to-day behavior that's not good for memory.
So a young person coming to you and comes to you for issues around memory loss, memory care. You then have him or her on a program. Do they also have to have medication?
Right.
And, let's assume that they change their lifestyle, they lead a very healthy lifestyle.
Yes.
Is that going to reverse their condition?
I think the prognosis, the outcome for younger people with depression is a lot better these days with medication. It can reverse the depression. We try not to put younger people, sort of under 65, on any programs. We refer to our colleagues as sort of general adult psychiatrists. So in memory care, we tend to focus on people over the age of 50, basically. But yes, they would be given medication, followed up with a GP. They would see a psychologist for memory training. The occupational therapist will do a home visit, so will the social worker.
What's the role of the occupational therapist in all of this?
It's quite a big one. I mean, it's basically a falls assessment at home. So older people tend to fall a lot when their memories are declining.
Right.
So other reasons for that as well. So we try and prevent falls, because if someone falls, they end up in a general hospital, and there are other risks there.
Broken bones, etc.
And that's a home assessment, looking at any sort of rugs that will slip, or where handrails should be. But they also then look at a structured activity schedule. So the worst thing you could do is you retire and then you just sit and watch TV. Not this TV, clearly. So you need cognitive stimulation.
Okay.
You need emotional stimulation and physical stimulation, or exercise. So the best thing is to exercise. 20 minutes a day, hopefully twice a day, safe walking, not falling and not getting mugged in the city. That's the best thing to do. But then obviously a healthy diet, what's good for the heart is good for the brain. But the stimulation cognitively of literally doing puzzles, Sudoku, some of these apps called Lumosity on an iPad, brain training, literally. Playing bridge or chess.
Okay, so what about someone like myself? I'm relatively healthy, I'm in good health.
Great.
I'm not quite sure what, my parents have passed on.
Sure.
But I don't think there was any Alzheimer's or any mental disorders in my side of the family. I'm not sure. There may or may not have been.
Sure.
Is there anything I ought to be doing at this stage in my life to perhaps, let's assume I live for, to my 90s, but I want to have a very sharp and a keen mind.
Yeah.
Is there anything I ought to be doing to just ensure that I don't go down that path?
For sure. So the short answer is yes. You're not allowed to retire, I'm afraid, ever. No, you have to work. Whether it's this sort of work.
So keep busy.
One has to have, you said it earlier, meaningful, purposeful activity. And that could be a lot of social works, good works, helping others. It doesn't have to be paid, although that's obviously important these days. But having tasks that are meaningful every day. It might be in the garden, it might be doing chores at home. That's step one. Then quality of social stimulation, or relationships with family, but also your neighbors. At a church or a mosque or in the community, seeing people is so important to prevent that isolation. That same Harvard study speaks about isolation is as damaging for an older person as is alcohol and drugs.
Sure.
Loneliness is a major, major problem. There was one study, nursing home residents were often didn't have any tactile touch for months at all, because the families weren't seeing them, they weren't physically that unwell, so the nurses weren't doing blood pressure. The skin's the largest sensory organ on the body, you need touch. Those activities are crucial. The OT, the occupational therapist, would do structured activities. On a Monday, maybe one does the washing. On a Tuesday, one would do some shopping at the store. Having a routine, a structured routine, is so important. The brain likes structure. It doesn't like free-floating, let's just sit and watch TV for 5 hours. That's probably the worst thing to do. So we try and simplify it and say cognitive stimulation, social stimulation, and then physical stimulation or exercise. Having a spouse or a family good quality relationships, having a GP that knows your history. So God forbid if there's a medical crisis, they can quickly get your health record, help you get to hospital. Those are the sort of basics, yeah.
And we've almost reached the end of the interview. In closing, what do you want to say? We've touched on younger people presenting with possible memory problems and older people, and how crucial it is to be supportive of them.
Sure.
And of course, the support structure to get the necessary counselling.
Yes.
What else do you want to add to all of that?
It's worth trying. One shouldn't give up just because someone is old. And we make too many assumptions. Just because someone is apparently dementing or psychotic or a nightmare, it is definitely worth trying to understand the human being and what they're suffering. For one very simple reason, we will get there at some point.
We forget about that, don't we? We think we're going to live forever. Thank you indeed. It's been fascinating talking to you. I do hope that you join us again sometime in the new year to talk about other issues as far as mental health is concerned.
Sure.
Thank you,
for having
Dr.
me.
Ryan Fuller.
Pleasure.
And there you have it. We've talked memory care, we've talked a bit of Alzheimer's, dementia, and how you, in the prime of your life, can start taking care of yourself. Just follow the doctor's orders, and hopefully you won't go down the path of Alzheimer's or anyone of the dementias. Don't go away, we're still going to talk I Am Possible, a new road safety campaign, and later on we're going to talk drug rehabilitation. Our final interview for the morning will be with Dr. Nazim Abrams. He's from the Lighthouse on the Horizon Foundation. We're going to be talking drug rehabilitation. Right now we're going to talk road safety, and we're talking to husband and wife team, Glenda and Dumiso Nkosi. They've got their own foundation running for a couple of years, and it's called I Am Possible, the I Am Possible Foundation. Let's hear what it's all about, when it got started, and how's it serving you and I, the general public. Good morning, Glenda and Ndumiso. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
I Am Possible, it's a foundation. I understand it has to do with road safety. But before we get there, let's understand who is this amazing husband and wife team sitting in studio with me this morning. Glenda, let's start with you first.
Okay, I'm Glenda, and we've been married for 13 years now.
And may you have many years of happy marriage.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We've got 3 beautiful babies.
Wonderful.
Yes, and we started this foundation in 2000. Well, my husband started in 2003 before I met him. And then when I met him, it was already established.
Okay.
And then
So what were you doing before having met him? What sort of work were you involved in?
Well, I was still a teenager, fresh out of school. Fresh out of school, not working as yet.
Right.
But then I met him. But we didn't go in and work onto the foundation immediately. It was just on a starting phase, just working on the ideas and seeing how road accidents are affecting families. It was his idea, his vision. And as a wife, I also fell into
Tagged
along and loved it.
Yeah. Wonderful. So, Ndumiso, something must have happened somewhere along the line in your immediate circle for you to decide something needs to be done about road safety. What's the story?
Wow. Yes. It happened, at the time when I was still a little boy. I'm personally from 5 car accidents.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear
the last one, I was age 12. Where I was pushed, by some of the guys from school. I was pushed onto an oncoming car.
Oh, no.
And then, fast forward, then, it led into my interest towards studying advertising and creativity, so that I'd then eventually create a solution that will help in terms of curbing, accidents. One of the things was because one of my friends were, I think, about 8, 9. My friend and also a classmate. He died, in an accident at that time, and we were both, runners, and we were the favorites of the teachers. We were runners, as in athletics, as well as we were more like your favorites, for the teachers. They would send you there and there, so they knew that we are the quickest, we are reliable. And so it so happened that when he was involved in that accident, we could see, from the school windows, we could see through what was happening, by the side of the road. So those memories, me growing up, they kept on lingering on until after a point where I had studied, advertising, I did copywriting, and yes, I believe it was, the creator who brought down then an idea to say, hey, you need to speak about this and make sure, that at least you take the word out. Families are aware of what's happening, and we try and reduce, those things.
So it must have made quite an impact on your life, those accidents, and seeing your friend being killed, and you decided it kind of at the back of your mind all the time, and when the opportunity presented itself, you decided to start an NPO and get the word out. Now, let's understand what is the purpose of the NPO. How is it serving the general public, and just how difficult was it to get the NPO up and running?
Wow, it was you know when you're still starting off, you're still very young as well, and there's challenges. There were other big companies that were pushing, or that are pushing, the same kind of a thing as road safety. And so yes, it was a bit of a challenge. However, we then went through phases of testing and engaging the public, talking to nursery schools, talking to families, talking to churches, and see what is their general feel of what is happening around their societies, and also us then bringing up a solution that talks to their issues. Then we look at how then does that make them feel, how does that help in terms of changing of the behavior, and looking at some of those elements, because it's not only it's not only changing of the behavior, but it's also looking at the financial elements as well, to say if a family has lost their member, they're also affected, financially, and in so many other ways. If I was the one used to washing dishes at night, now the setup has to change because I'm no longer there, So looking at all of those things, what are the impacts and what is the feedback from the people? It's been helping us, and also it's been helping the society as well. It's been helping the community.
So how long is it that you're running as far as I Am Possible is concerned?
We were registered back in 2012.
So you've been running ever since?
We've been running ever since,
You
yes.
are up against, maybe not, you're up against perhaps Arrive Alive and the Automobile Association.
Yes.
Are they embracing your concept, or do they see you as competition?
Wow, it's a bit hard to tell, because when we meet, we meet at certain conferences and engagements. It's hard to tell that maybe they're embracing or they're against or not, because we all, when we're discussing, we all get up to the fact that, guys, we are all working towards one goal.
Absolutely. Saving lives.
Yes.
Preventing accidents, being responsible road users.
That's it.
Okay, you needed to have a very solid plan of action when you applied for the NPO.
Yes.
How much of red tape was involved, and at any point where you turned down it all? Did you have to start the process from scratch again? Did you have to go back to the drawing board to do something differently and represent perhaps?
Fortunately, over the years, since 2003, when we started off with this, I was involved in other community organizations, because I used to run an advertising agency, so I would help, community organizations or NGOs in terms of registering, their entities, as well as.
So you knew the ropes.
I knew the ropes. So when we then, came up with registering I Am Possible, it was, a one-way type of a thing.
Okay, so talk to us about I Am Possible. When I talked about Arrive Alive and I talked about the Automobile Association, we know that they are national bodies.
Yes.
Where are you based? What are the communities or areas you service?
We are also a nationwide based entity. We go as far as PE, we go as far as Cape Town, we're going all around. Yes, our base is here in Joburg, but we're spreading across the entire country.
So you do road shows all around the country?
Yes.
Okay, so who's your target audience? School children?
Yes, our target is big. We target everybody.
I assume you're very involved as far as road shows are concerned. Talk to us about it. How do you how do you roll out a roadshow, and whom do you go to, and how do you make that approach?
Okay. Basically, at the moment, we have the mascots, our 3 mascots. So we're using those for our road shows, and those mascots speak to the babies, the children.
And they love it.
They love the mascots. So they speak to the children because we've got the family, mommy, papa, and the baby mascot.
And what are their names?
It's Mama Paddy, Daddy Paddy, and Paddy, as in pedestrian. If you see our mascots, they
Paddy
are
for pedestrian. Oh,
yes.
that's cute.
They are
For
feet
pedals.
and
Right.
for pedals as well, because
And
they
I know
are feet.
those mascots are screening on air as we speak.
Oh yes. So if you see them, they are red, yellow, and the yellow for caution. That's the robot colors. Those
Okay,
mascots.
red, green, and yellow.
Red, green, and yellow.
Okay.
Yes. And then they represent the feet for walking pedestrians, and they also represent for pedals when you are driving
a car.
Yes. So those mascots, we use them for road shows. We go to malls. We go to schools, we go to creches, we teach using the mascots, the awareness of road safety, especially to the kids, because our approach is, if we are speaking to the children, they will speak to the parents.
True.
So if you tell the children when you go into a car, make sure that you put on you buckle up your seatbelt. When they go into the car, say, Mommy, seatbelt please. So the kids are the ones who always tell the parents to say, we saw this, and they told us to do this at school, and then they do it. The parents then end up doing it.
So how long does the actual presentation last?
30 minutes.
30 minutes.
30 minutes.
And the kids are very excited
They're
about
very
it.
excited. On the road shows, we do the presentation, then we take pictures with the kids. They interact with Baby Paddy a lot because they feel that Baby Paddy is more their age.
Yeah, yeah.
And
They identify
with the baby as well. And Baby Paddy, she interacts with the kids and tells them, even on one-on-one, to say, you know what, when you go into a car, make sure that you've got your seatbelts on. Don't disturb mommy and daddy when they're driving. So we have also interactions with the audience during our road shows. So it's not only the presentation only, also there's an interaction with everyone else
And it
around.
makes the kids think and start questioning,
Yes,
obviously. And I like the fact that Baby Paddy is a girl.
Yes,
How
she is a cute girl.
Okay, let's go for an ad break. I'm talking to the I Am Possible team. We're talking road safety. It is that time of year, and this husband and wife team has started this NPO a couple of years ago, and they are absolutely doing amazing work. Arrive Alive and the Automobile Association are very visible on our national roads during the holiday periods, but here you have a couple. Not only are they visible on the national roads, but they do road shows throughout the country to our children in schools, etc. So these are the people you need to book for your schools and your events, because they are going to leave your kids with a lasting impression. Time for an ad break. We're talking to the husband and wife team, Glenda and Dumiso Nkosi, together with the other family called the Paddy family. You've seen visuals of the Paddy family as we were talking just now, flashing on screen. You'll see some more of those visuals throughout the interview. We're talking road safety and just how important it is for this awareness to be created in schools throughout the country. Now, coming back to you, Nkosi, I'm wondering, you've been active since 2012, and you've got this family, dad, mom, and little Paddy. They're colourful, they're beautiful, they're very attractive to little children. But I should imagine there's a lot of creative thinking going into it all of the time, because you can't go to the same audience over and over again with the same message. Your core message has to be the same, road safety. But how do you kind of conceptualize and talk through as a team about what is it different that you're going to be putting out into the public space every year or every pre-holiday season?
Well, yes, it does, involve a lot of creative work, a lot of research, looking at the times. Times are changing, So we are looking at things like, and now we're busy developing a game
Online.
Yes. We're developing a game where you can just purchase an app, or you can. It's a digital one, and also there's a board game, that we've
with
designed.
the Petty family.
Yes, with the Petty family, and there's also, we've also built that into toys. Whereby when you go to restaurants, with time, you'll start, getting that as part of your toy package. What do you call it?
Your meals, your kiddies' meals.
Your kiddies' meals, yes.
Is that happening, or is this plans for the new year?
It's plans, yes. It's plans for the new year, and also going forward together with the digital game as well as the board game. So there's a lot, that goes into that in terms of how we present and still stick to the core of the message, but you keep on changing your method of conveying, that same message. We're also looking at what's this theatrical, putting it into a theatrical,
like a puppet show?
Yes, type of a thing.
Okay.
Yes.
So I presume, seeing that you've done all of your long-term planning, it's all in place, and there's exciting things ahead of us, that it's trademark registered, so no one can steal that concept.
Yes, definitely.
Why the Petty family? How did you come up with this concept? I mean, it's difficult to visualize and conceptualize, and then eventually create this being, which is going to be a big feature in our children's lives, South African children's lives, for the next so many years.
As she explained briefly, it made sense to say, when you're walking, you're using your feet. And when you're stepping on your pedals, driving, you're using your feet. And we then, thinking of what then, can represent, what can represent the two types of people, we then felt, yes, it will be talking through a foot, and also then try and put together a language that will be easy, for the eye, easy for the children in terms of colors, the use of yellow or caution, yellow for caution, and red to stop, and green, for what's this thing? Go.
And I like the concept you've used, and I like the fact that you've used the colors of the traffic lights, because it makes sense. It identifies with the strong message that you want to put out as far as road safety is concerned.
Yes.
What's going to change, or how do you keep reinventing different and very meaningful messages to put out to the children and to the general public?
Our message is they speak to the conscience of the person, because we're looking at changing the behavior. We look at making people aware of themselves. So interaction with the people, engaging with them, looking at, and we also go as far as digging deep into the pain space. Then that helps us in terms of,
for example,
when you say pain space, she heads a program whereby it's child-headed families, whereby she looks after child-headed families. You find that there are children who lost their parents through road accidents. Some it's because the parent themselves, they were drunk. Some it's because someone was drunk and they bumped into, and they were crashed into the parents. So when you go into the pain space, that's where, you dig out a lot of information that can help in terms of creating a solution that will be easily communicated, to the others, to say, guys, please be aware now of this. Like now we've discovered factors like, it's a norm now to say negligence, but we've discovered factors like, in terms of changing behavior, let's also look at not only excitement, but there's
road rage.
There's road rage. There's road rage, and then there's
there's also the issue around
there's fatigue. Yes, I want to mention fatigue,
very especially at this time of year. A lot of people dislike taxi drivers and blame taxi drivers for fatalities, road fatalities. Are you hoping to target and perhaps have a campaign targeted at taxi drivers and the Taxi Association?
We have.
Glenda, you're shaking your head in agreement.
We are currently working with taxi drivers at the moment. We've got stickers that we go to give them every month, and so that they can spread the message of road safety. We speak to the taxi association right now. We are speaking to the one in the West Rand, Gauteng area. We're hoping to touch everywhere else in Gauteng before we go nationally. But we are speaking to taxi drivers and making them also aware of the behaviors on the road
And their responsibilities.
as well, because as a taxi driver, you need to understand that the people that you are carrying, they are important to somebody. You are carrying a breadwinner, you are carrying a parent, you are carrying a child, somebody in your taxi. And even you as a taxi driver, you are important to somebody. So we want the taxi drivers to be aware of that, not just to chase after, I need to get to the place, to destination faster and go back again to the taxi rank. So with the taxi drivers that we are working with at the moment, we're getting so much positive feedback, and even from their passengers as well, seeing them supporting a road safety initiative in the West Rand at the moment. Even the passengers are getting more comfortable using the taxis. And we also want the passengers to be aware as well that even taxi drivers, as much as they're taxi drivers, they're also human, and they also have families. Because sometimes if you go into a taxi, you find the passengers are the ones who are pushing the taxi drivers to take a shorter route, drive faster. So even the passengers need to be aware that they also put pressure on the taxi drivers. So we're driving that awareness both on the taxi drivers and the passengers.
Let's just take a few steps back. And Kosi mentioned something about you working with child-headed households.
Yes.
What sort of work are you doing with these child caregivers?
We basically have we have seen, or we have noticed childhood families whereby their parents have passed away due to road accidents. So we've identified those families. So far we're working with 3 families.
And what is it that you do? Yeah.
So we provide food, we provide clothing for them, and if ever they need social workers as well, work with social workers to step in and help those kids in whatever way they can. So we identify the kids, we ask for donations for food and clothing. Even if they need school things, we also, for now we're going to Christmas, want them to have a nice Christmas meal, and then after that we have to find out when they need anything for school, we also provide for them. But we're only working with the ones that were affected by road accidents at the moment.
Wow, I think that's absolutely commendable, highly commendable. Please continue doing this amazing work.
Thank you.
Partners, you can't do this on your own.
Yes.
You need support, and you need huge support to be touching lives in such a positive way. Who are your partners, and are you looking for future funders as well?
We are currently working with TETA, that's Transport Education and Training Authority, and we then are partnering with, we're looking at partnering with other companies. There's also RTIA that has endorsed us as well to say we can go out.
RTIA meaning?
RTIA, that is a Road Traffic Infringement Agency. And so it's basically those 2 at the moment. We are still looking. We're still looking, to get more partners that will come on board, precisely also to help us with our soon coming TV show. A kiddies TV show.
Wow.
so we're looking for those, and not only to say on the corporate or the government, but we're also calling on the public to help us, with donations of, in any form. Yes, to come in.
Okay, we've almost come to wrap up time. Very quickly, tell us about your kiddie show. What is the core message of that show going to be? Also, responsibility and road safety.
Yes, it's responsibility. Training people about responsibility and other matters before they even start driving the cars. We're also talking about fatigue. We're talking about taking chances. That's one of the elements, out of excitement. Taking chances, you want to cut, and that triggers accidents.
Overtaking because you think you're macho. You have a more powerful car than the other road user.
Exactly. So we emphasize in the fact that you are important. You need to know that you are important.
Absolutely.
As much as you are on the road, you're not only doing it for yourself or by yourself. There's other people who also have other families or people who are
And
attached
have
and
a right
dependent
to
to
be
them.
on the roads.
You know, yes.
And
So
that's where we
it's
leave it.
those.
Thank you indeed. Keep up the amazing work. We'll be watching you guys. We'll be watching, looking out for your TV series, and all the very best. Thank you for being with us on the show this morning.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you,
for
thank you
having
so
us.
much.
Thank you.
And there you have it, the husband and wife team. Their foundation is called I Am Possible, and they are making amazing things possible in the lives of road users, child-headed households, and just the general public at large. It is that time of year. We need to be road savvy and be very aware of road safety. Still to come, Dr. Nazim Abrams to talk about drug rehabilitation. And welcome back to the final segment of the show. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We now have Dr. Nazim Abrams. He runs the Lighthouse on the Horizon Rehab Center. It's based out in Willow Park, Roodepoort. He has been in studio a couple of weeks ago, and this time around we've decided to kind of dig deep into the problems. We've talked long and hard about drug rehabilitation, drug addiction, and the problem with drugs in our communities. I don't think we've ever kind of unpacked it and talked about relapse prevention, relapse versus addiction, and relapse versus recovery. Dr. Nazim is very kindly coming to talk to us about it, because on the part of the loved ones, you can understand then if your husband, your wife, your son, your daughter is going through the process. Understand what's going on in his life, in his mind, and how supportive you can be. So let's get the show on the road. Assalamu alaikum, welcome to the program.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah, and shukran again for having me on the show.
I thank you, shukran, for wanting to dig deep into the issues. Not very many people, are prepared to dig deep and talk about it. We're going to try and give our viewers an understanding of what is relapse, relapse versus addiction, and relapse versus recovery. Over to you.
Okay. So when we talk about relapse, which is I think one of the biggest fears for any person or persons that is in a recovery process or that's going through a problem. Particularly when it comes to the caregivers, and we've last spoke about enabling and codependency. So if we look at the codependency factor, the parent is very dependent on what comes out of the healing process. So they're still very much affected by the process of the recovery process. So I think for us to understand that relapse situation or that relapse prevention process, one needs to understand recovery first, because one of the most fundamental points is that often and repeatedly people think they go into recovery and they're recovering from drugs, for example, or they're recovering from alcohol or from gambling, for example, right? So those are physical addictions.
Or any addiction,
or any other
matter.
physical addiction for that matter. So when they go into recovery, their perception or their belief system is that is what they're recovering from, and that is incorrect.
Well, that was my perception as well, quite
Yes.
honestly. So what exactly are they recovering from?
We need to look at what gets you to that point. So understanding that the actual physical addiction is in reality the end result of the problem. So if we look at that being said, then obviously there's another addiction or another form of addiction that prevails, which is your mental addiction. That is why your mental addiction is by far most stronger than your actual physical addiction.
So what's going on in your
in
mind?
your head, how you think, how you feel, your belief system, your character. your entire way of being, your spirituality. So all of that is affected to the point where when you eventually get to the point of a physical addiction, you become spiritually bankrupt. You've lost all values, all morals, all ethics. You've lost completely, where you now find yourself fundamentally evolving around a subcultured lifestyle, and a lifestyle by which has no values, has no merits of any morals or ethics. So,
and yet the addict thinks that he or she is in charge. I'm in
and
control, I'm good, you are the stupid one.
Correct. Which is exactly which points out how perfectly correct we are in what we're saying right now, because the actual addiction that you're fighting is that mental addiction. If you beat the mental addiction, you're beating the addiction. So now, understanding addiction, before we can really talk about, that's why I said recovery versus relapse prevention. So
let's just take a step back. When someone comes to your center, they bring a loved one in to be rehabilitated. What are the expectations, the parents or the wife, for example, or the husband, because even women are addicted these days?
Yes.
What are their expectations of their loved one coming home, and what advice do you give them? Are you going to suggest perhaps behavior changes on the part of the support system?
Absolutely.
What sort of behavior changes would those be?
For one, we need to step away from enabling, and we need to step away from the codependency.
But doesn't that create a big blow up?
It does. It does, because there's no understanding. Now, being a therapist, you understand that. You understand that process. So to answer your very first question is what is expected from those loved ones, from those caregivers. First of all, they clearly expect some sort of cure, some sort of change. A change, any change, in fact, quite honestly, any change, but what they're coming in for. So what they, what brought them there. So anything can go for other than, which in a way is completely understanding, because they've been traumatized by virtue of what the person has allowed himself to become. The
and
addict,
how the addict has created absolute mayhem in that family. He's turned that family upside down.
Absolutely.
There's no sense...
Playing mom against dad, playing dad against mom.
No sense of normalcy in that family.
Absolutely. The family becomes a dysfunctional family. So now we start alienating. So if there are siblings, the siblings start alienating from the parents, because the parents are taking his side, or the parents are not listening to them.
They're enabling.
They're enabling, and because they're enabling because they're codependent. So the isolation starts, where sibling starts to pull one side, and then you find, and that in itself is traumatizing on a level of its own.
Yes.
Because now that little boy or that little girl who's a little bit younger or maybe even older goes and sit in the room there, and they isolate and they start beating themselves up. And the sad part is that most parents don't even realize that the person that they're focusing on is self-inflicting this problem on himself and on them. But the persons that really need their assistance, that really need their help, that really needs their support, is sitting in the room, isolating. And that person
and they're the okay ones.
Yes, but they're really not. They're really not the okay ones. And that is why it's so important for us to understand addiction. Because if you understand addiction, then you can understand recovery.
All right, so you say the other family members are not okay because they've become dysfunctional because of all the manipulation by the addict.
By the addict, the manipulation, but also remember, as a caregiver, it's very important for us to understand that we love so deeply that we also get blindsided.
Unconditionally.
There's unconditional love. So
Yes.
because of that unconditional love, we only see what we want to see.
True.
And we're also hurting so badly as caregivers, we also just want to feel a little better, even if it's just that little better. We want to feel that little better. So whatever we do, whatever we say, we're saying it to really make ourselves feel better with the intention, yes, to help the individual. But in hindsight, it's really to make ourselves feel better. And you see that in the behavior, where they don't follow the processes that needs to be followed. For example, if I had to give, and which I do very often, if somebody phones me and says to me, please, can you assist? My son has been locked up for possession, and you know, we need to get him out, and he's going to come to rehab. Now, all of a sudden, rehabilitation becomes an option. For months and probably years, rehabilitation was never an option. We were trying to deal with it on our own. So now he's locked up, and he's locked up on a Sunday. And now we need to get him out because we love so deeply, we don't want him to spend the night in the cells.
And he probably bluffs them and says, yes, I will go into rehab, get me out of here. And once he's out of there,
2 weeks down the road, a week
I'm
down
okay,
the road,
I don't need rehab.
I don't need it anymore.
Okay, that's another program on its own. We need to look at it another time. Relapse prevention. And also the reason why I'm talking to you this time of year, I've been told that sometimes the problem just becomes more exacerbated. I think it's almost seen by the addict as festive period, party time. I need to have a big, a never-ending party. And of course, the loved one's support system are going through hell. Correct. So let's assume the person has gone into rehab, they come out. What is it, whose responsibility is relapse prevention? The entire family?
Relapse prevention, there's one person solely responsible for that. It's the recovering person himself. The family, the loved ones, the caregivers, they can become what we call accountabilities. In other words, they're not accountable for them. We call them accountabilities because they now become a support structure. So they will support. Not a policing structure. No, not a policing structure. That's why I said we mustn't misunderstand the terminology accountability. You know, because when you talk about accountability, you assume that we're saying now that you're accountable for that. No, we use the terminology accountability because it's a very strong way of putting your support structure into place. You can't very well say you're supporting your child, but you don't do or follow the processes as well. So
there's hard work involved as far as the family is concerned as well.
In many homes, homes, you'll find that the parents are still perhaps drinking. Oh. Okay? And then the child is on drugs or the child is abusing alcohol. Now, the very same parents puts this child into rehab, but there's still alcohol in the house. So what kind of support structure is that?
And that's where we need to go for our first ad break. I'm talking to Dr. Nazim Abrams. He's from the Lighthouse on the Horizon Rehab Centre in Willow Park, Johannesburg. We're talking relapse prevention. We're going to look relapse versus addiction and also relapse versus recovery. So do stay with us. We're talking to Dr. Nazim Abrams about addictions, and I'm afraid I don't think we're going to have enough time to cover everything, but let's see how we go. Relapse prevention, how do we start unpacking it? How do we understand it if our loved one is addicted and we're wanting to help him through the process?
We need to be able to, like I said in the beginning, we need to understand the recovery process. So I'm going to quickly say that in the recovery process, we need to understand that we're recovering from character disorders. That is the recovering process, okay? The physical addiction is the end result of the problem. That brings us to the point of the real factual addiction, which is the mental addiction, which is stemmed from a negative attitude, behavior, and character.
Now, I know you are an NLP practitioner. Correct. So if someone comes to your facility, you're going to teach them techniques of approaching issues, problems, and just thinking differently. Is that going to help them?
Correct. Because that is going to help shape the behavior differently. And that's going to change the thinking patterns. So when you start changing the thinking patterns, then you start changing the emotions and the feelings.
And you get a better outcome.
And then you get a better outcome. So you got a better thinking, which creates a better feeling, which creates a better action.
Okay. Relapse versus addiction. So now we've over this period, I imagine, as far as relapse prevention is concerned, your loved one is going strong. family dynamics are beginning to start looking healthy again. So why do we need to understand relapse versus addiction?
Because relapse is not when I pick up using drugs. Relapse is when I'm starting to mentally relapse, when I'm slowly going back into the old attitudes and behaviors.
Now, the loved ones are not going to know that. I'm not going to know what's going on in your mind. How can I support you if I don't know
Remember,
what's going on?
we're talking of attitude and we're talking of behavior. That is something that you cannot lie. And
Oh,
you
so I
cannot
can
hide.
pick up.
You pick it up in the actual way of being. So slowly, and I'll use simple examples. For example, they'll come out of rehab and they're very disciplined, so they make salah 5 times a day. Waking up for first week, they're waking up early for Fajr. They even wake up for Tahajjud, if that has to be. And then within the next week or so, they start missing the Tahajjud.
Or the next couple of months.
Yes, and then they start missing Fajr, and slowly the waqt goes. So that's just a simple example, you know. Then there's other examples with perhaps having chores at home. So because I'm just fresh out of rehab, I'm not working yet, I'm still looking for a job. So to have my share in its purpose in my family home, so I become proactive. So I assist, even though we may have a maid, but I assist. I keep my own room tidy, for example. I keep my own cupboard in check. I keep my own bed made up on a personal capacity, despite the fact that we may have a helper. So slowly that will stop, you know.
Something as simple and uncomplicated as keeping your room neat and tidy.
Correct.
Really?
We have a philosophy in the therapeutic community and the environment where we actually say the state of your cupboard is the state of your mind. So if your cupboard's not in check and you have your clothes just not folded properly and packed away properly, that is how you start packing things away in your head. So everything's unraveled, everything's lying around, so you're all over the place. That is compulsive and impulsive behaviors. So these are all the signs and symptoms that you're going to start picking up with relapse. And those are the mental relapse, aggression, sleeping patterns, uneasy eating patterns.
Talk to us a little bit about sleeping and uneasy eating. How does that play out?
Yes, for example, we will watch, because we've got DSTV, so we will watch TV till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Now, what normal being can watch watch TV till 2 o'clock in the morning watching movies and has to be up for Fajr at 4 or 3:30? You know, so when do you sleep? So that is abnormal. That is abnormal behavior. But it becomes norm because now we start justifying it, we start rationalizing it, we start minimizing it. Particularly now, you mentioned something about this time of the year. So we look at how the brain works. We know that when you do something that is pleasureful, your endorphins releases a lot of serotonin and dopamine. So you feel those happy feelings and you don't feel the sad feelings. So this time of the year, we know that school's closing, I'm coming to the end of my work period, I'm going on leave, and so I'm going to have some time off, even despite I might not be going away because I don't have money to go away, but I'm going to be at home, so I'm going to be able to sleep a little bit late. All those bring good feelings because it's a festive time, it's a restful time, it's a peaceful time, it's a giving and a loving time. So all these happy feelings are running all haywire. So automatically you start remembering all the experiences you had during this time. So now you go both positive and negative experiences. You're not only going to think positive. So you're thinking negative. So those people that were using drugs, that were drinking, that were partying, those feelings also come up. And remember, in a false frame of mind and in a faulty belief system, those were good times. Despite the fact that it was haram, that it was not right, that it was totally incorrect, that it was not how we were raised, that it was not part of normal life. But it was what made us feel good. And why it made us feel good was because at that point in time, we had a very false perception of what life should be. Because our attitudes and our behaviors and characters has changed dramatically, which resulted in our belief systems changing.
Now, if your belief system changes, let's assume you've been addicted for the past 10 years, you've changed so radically. You're not the same person I knew 10 years ago. But let's assume you're now in recovery for a year, a couple of months or a year. how long does it take for us to see the old Nazim again?
I think that's very, very, and it's a very, very good point you're bringing across there, because what I find in therapy, that the recovering persons are in truth relapse prone while being in recovery. You see that in the therapy process. So being in relapse or being relapse prone, meaning that they emotionally, psychologically, or even mentally, just mentally, they're still relapsing within that process. So they're still holding on to negative attributes, negative attitudes, negative behaviors. And they're so blindsided that they don't even see it, because in their heads, I'm in rehab. I'm doing my best. I haven't drank anything. I haven't smoked anything. I haven't snorted anything. I haven't spiked anything. So I'm clean. No, you're not clean. We have a philosophy in TC for that also, dry drunk syndrome. You dry, but you're still drunk. Your attitude, your behavior, your character is still very much drunk. It's still out of whack. So if we understand that process, and then we understand recovery. And if you understand recovery process, then your relapse process becomes so much easier, because now you are fully aware of what relapse is all about. Relapse is not when I pick up and use drugs.
Nazim, how difficult is it for you to kind of get this very strong message across to the addict or the person that's in rehab? Because I think once they understand what you're trying to convey, do they ever get that aha moment? What does it take for you to get them to that aha moment? Because once they reach that moment or that realization, that's when they're going to take control. That's hopefully when they're going to say, I need to clean up my act.
With consistent therapy, group therapy, as well as one-on-one therapy, particularly after the purification phase, healthy body, healthy mind.
True.
So once those toxicity levels are completely out of your system.
And how long does that take?
That takes, with us, it takes about 17 to 18 days. So between that period of time, and we've actually sped that process up. Normally, in the beginning, it used to take almost 30 days to do that. You go through a full 30-day, a full month process of detoxing. So we've actually, we through psychotherapy and the NLP processes and the methodology of the therapeutic community program, we had the ability to actually speed that process up, because simultaneously now you're emotionally and psychologically detoxing as well. Because whilst being in that sauna process, whilst being in that purification process, you're already identifying and you're already dealing. And through that process, you have the ability to start your rehabilitation process faster. So that aha moment comes a lot faster.
Alhamdulillah. Relapse versus recovery, how difficult is this?
So again, we come back to when we talk about relapse versus recovery, if you understand your recovery process completely and accept it for what it really is, and not for what you perceive it to be or for what you would like it to be, then your relapse process, again, like I said, becomes so easy that relapse becomes no option at all. Because now you're aware of your functioning. You're not worried about whether you're going to use. If a person is at the point of worrying about using, he's already mentally relapsed.
Oh, so he's at the facility with you. He's pleasing his loved ones. He's trying to supposedly clean up his act, but already planning that
without even realizing.
Next week or next month or next year, in the new year, he's going to start using again, because he is in control. Correct. That's what he thinks.
And the sad part is they don't even realize it, because one of the false frame of mind, or one of the faulty beliefs of relapse prevention is telling yourself constantly that I will never use. Relapse is not an option. By continuously telling yourself that, you're already putting yourself in harm's way, because you're thinking of something that you should have left weeks ago at another point. But you're carrying that point with you, so you're taking that from step to step. So if for argument's sake we got the recovery relapse prevention process from step 1 to step 10, for example. So what you're learning in step 1, you're carrying with you all the way through. But you need to understand step 1, understand it, live it, accept it for what it is, and then you must move on. But it doesn't mean that you need to forget step 1 when you get to step 10, because that's what happens. When you're at step 10, you need to remember step 1 to step 9. You must carry it with you all
got to
the
live
time.
it.
You got to live it. The minute you start, we call it you leaving your toolbox at the gate.
Right.
So you come to rehab, you get all the tools, you get all the coping skills, you develop this very strong personality, a very different persona. But when you walk out of that gate, society taxes you almost 80%, because almost automatically you are now influenced by what's going outside on by that gate, and you forget everything that took place inside the gate.
Almost wrap up time, and of course I alluded to the fact that it's silly season. Your very important message to recovering addicts and people who are possibly considering that in the new year I'm going to clean up my act, and I know you've heard that over and over and over again, but what is a very positive message you'd like to leave people with?
You slack, you go back. As simple as that. If you slack in understanding that you need to watch your character, you need to watch your behavior, you need to watch yourself, then you're going to become comfortable. If you become comfortable, you're going to become complacent. If you become complacent, you will slack. If you slack, you go back.
And that's where we leave it, sad to say. And I hope and pray that people watching us this morning who are in recovery will not slack and not go back.
Amen. Amen.
That was Dr. Nazim Abrams from the Lighthouse Recovery Centre on the horizon in Willow Park, Roodepoort, talking to us about issues around recovery, relapsing and prevention. Amazing stuff, and he's told me off air that a lot of people say once an addict, always an addict. He says not so. His recovery rate is phenomenal, and alhamdulillah he has healed many, many people through his centre. So let's make dua for Dr. Nazim Abrams, for his rehab facility, and for all addicts all around the world, inshallah. Please take care on the roads. A big thank you from the Let's Talk production team and myself. And as always, it is Khudafiz.
يا هلا 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 حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا